Okay, well, thanks again for your patience. I think we'll kick off now. We're getting up to well in excess of 300 participants, which is absolutely amazing. It's been a pretty unbelievable time, I think. It's fair to say it's surreal, and this is the first time that we've ever done anything like this. So we've had to scramble to try and pull this together. So hopefully all the technology works and we can move through things. So just to kick off, I'd just like to wish everyone a good afternoon and thank you so much for joining us on this webinar at this critical juncture for our industry and, for that matter, for our country. I think it's fair to say that few, if anyone, would have anticipated the COVID-19 virus and its devastating effect. The speed and scale of the economic and social impact of this virus is unprecedented, and I think it's a once in our lifetime event, and it looks like no person or business anywhere in the world is being spared. This has created a situation where we're all having to make really important decisions about our business, our employees and our customers in an environment where there are far more unknowns than knowns. And that creates fear, doubt and uncertainty. In short, there really is no playbook for what we're all experiencing now, both professionally and personally. That being said, AAA's role is to support our members, and I can assure you that we'll be there with you every step of the way as we navigate together through these difficult times and out through the other side. While it's likely that the AAA will be forced to physically close our office over the coming days or weeks, we have a business continuity plan in place to enable our team to work remotely, and we have a talented group of people that are 100% committed to doing everything we can to support you at the time you most need us. Our sole focus is on ensuring that we provide you with concise and accurate information to assist you in making decisions, as well as providing services that will help cushion the impact on your business. The information that we're sending out is being distributed regularly via EDMs and newsletters, and is also being loaded on the news section of our website, aaa.com.au. I did want to start off again by thanking you all for joining us, and particularly for those that sent questions in advance, because what they did was really help us shape the content for this session this evening. And based on your input, we've actually added an additional section, which I'll cover off, which will address two main questions. The first one is, will the auto industry be deemed an essential service in the event that there's a full government shutdown of business across the country? The second question is, what government assistance is available for your business and your employees? So as I said, I'll cover off on both of those subjects in a bit more detail shortly. I'll then introduce my colleague, Emma Dalley, who's the CEO of Industry Legal Group. They deliver the AAA Employer Assist service on our behalf, and Emma's presentation will cover off the implications of COVID-19 on the workplace, including on general health and safety, leave entitlements, and temporary business closures. We'll then finish off with a Q&A session of between 20 and 30 minutes, depending on the volume of questions. But just before I do kick off the formal presentation, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping points. Firstly, as I said to many of you at the outset, we've had nearly 500 registrations, and I can see on my screen we're rapidly approaching 400 people, which is an incredible response. I think one, it shows that there's that degree of uncertainty out there, and you're looking for us for a bit of guidance, and we will do the best we can tonight. But secondly, I think it's also a sign that our industry really does stick together in times of need. One of the downsides of that is we're not able to activate microphones for attendees. You can imagine with that many people online and no one can see each other, it would just be an untenable situation. So, but having said that, there is the opportunity, and you're all seeing it. I'm seeing lots of information coming through, and questions coming through, and comments. So there are a few people having trouble hearing me at the moment, but I'll continue on. If there is, ongoing problems, we'll try and rectify it, but I'll try and keep on. So basically, we will have a Q&A session at the end, and you can lodge your questions via Q&A, and Emma and I will endeavour to do our best to answer as many of those questions as we can. I will say that if you could hold off lodging your questions until towards the end of the formal presentation tonight. Just that we have got sort of forward warning on the sort of things that you're interested in. So your question may be covered in the content this evening. If it's not, and we can't cover it at the end, what we will endeavour to do is try and collate all the unanswered questions, and we'll distribute an FAQ tomorrow with those unanswered questions. Alternatively, you can contact our Employer Assist hotline at any time to discuss any specific issues you have, and Emma will give you information on how to do that shortly. So firstly, just to kick off answering those two specific questions. First one in relation to automotive repair and parts being designated as an essential service. Our team, it's been led, and this activity has been led by Leslie Yates, our Government Relations Manager, really has been chasing every rabbit down every hole over the past week to ensure that this happens. This has included letters and follow-up calls to the offices of state premiers and key ministers, as well as the Prime Minister, key federal ministers and agencies. One of the challenges we have here is we are in really uncharted waters, so it's very difficult to find out who are the key decision makers, because it is a collaboration between states and the federal government. But we've basically got or covered every base that we can. We've also reached out to a number of other automotive industry associations to encourage them to join the push, and it's great to see, particularly this week, a number of those industry associations really getting active on this issue as well. Our position at the moment is that the advice we're giving government is that, in our view, the supply of automotive parts and repair is an essential service, and that we're advising our members that and to remain trading until the government tell us otherwise. And the categoric advice to you at the moment is continue trading as normal. We'll obviously talk about some of the other precautions that you need to bring into place from a workplace point of view, but at the moment, automotive repair and parts supply and manufacturing is business as usual, and that's essentially what we're telling government. Now, we know the government does need to make a lot of very difficult decisions around the closure of businesses. They've already made significant decisions, and they will be making more. But there's also a need for the government to ensure that the country has its basic necessities in life. And in our view, our industry keeps other industries moving. Without parts supply and automotive repair and services, and automotive repair, other services will suffer. Emergency vehicles, medical supply, food and other transportation all require time-critical replacement parts and urgent repair. While it's likely that the full list of essential services will only be published in conjunction with the announcement of a full shutdown of all non-essential activities and services, we are cautiously optimistic that our sector will be included on this list. Our optimism is based on the positive discussions that we're having with governments, both state and federal, all around the country, as well as international precedent. In recent days, we've seen the US, Canada, United Kingdom, and most recently New Zealand all designate auto parts and repair as an essential service. I will, however, say that even if we are to secure this exemption from full closure, it won't be a silver bullet to shield our entire industry from the full impact of this situation. The lockdowns that will be brought in on activity and movement of our public will have dramatic effects on the demand of every business within our industry. And every single individual business, if we are able to keep open in the event of a shutdown, every individual business is going to have to make some decisions and work through issues like the health and safety of your employees and your customers, and then an individual judgment on if you open and in what capacity. We do, however, believe that it's a far better outcome to be in a position for each individual business owner to make those decisions on their own, rather than just the government mandating a full shutdown of our industry and essentially giving us 24 hours notice, which is what they've done in the different phases that they've gone through up until now. I'll now make some comments about the range of government assistance available to businesses to assist you to get through this economic shock that we are all experiencing and will experience over the next few months. The first thing I'll say is the amount of government support announced to date is quite significant, and particularly for small and medium-sized businesses. I think the government have done a better job of designing the packages than they have of actually promoting how to access them and what's in them. So we're going to try and do that tonight for you and over subsequent days. And I think it's really important before you start making too many decisions about your staffing requirements and what you're going to do from a business point of view and how you're going to handle your employees. I think it really is important as business owners and managers to understand exactly what is available and how to access it. And then you can make some more informed decisions about the weeks and months ahead. The primary federal government support mechanism that's been announced to date falls in two sort of main categories. The first are payments that will be made to your business automatically when you lodge your monthly or quarterly BAS statements. And then there are those that you'll need to apply for. So the primary support program is a cash flow assistance program, and that doesn't require any specific application process. To be eligible for this, you just have to have a turnover under $50 million and remain trading and lodging your BAS statements over the coming months, and you'll receive this financial assistance automatically. We've just undertaken a comprehensive analysis of this support package, and in our view, the majority of AAAA member companies will be in a position to access the maximum $100,000 in financial support between now and October. In essence, the scheme works by rebating the PAYG withholding tax that you remit to the ATO on behalf of your employees via the lodgement of your BAS statement. So every month or every quarter when you put your BAS statement in, you're required to remit the amount of PAYG that you've withheld for your employees. And essentially what this scheme does is rebate that money back to you up to a maximum of $100,000. So for illustrative purposes, what we've done, and we've got some information that's gone out this afternoon, and we're trying to use case studies of different profiles of businesses that are amongst our members. But for tonight's purposes, we'll use an automotive repair business that has 5 employees. So 1 front of house employee, 3 technicians, and the owner manager. We estimate that based on average salaries and so on, we estimate that a business of this profile would have total monthly withholding tax of about $10,600 per month. And let's assume they lodge their BAS statement quarterly. So based on this case study, this business would receive $32,000 in direct financial assistance 14 days after they lodge their March BAS statement. So March BAS statement is due at the end of April. So at the very latest, in mid-May, this business would receive $32,000 in assistance. They then receive a further $18,000 in assistance 14 days after they lodge their June BAS statement, which is due at the end of July. So a total of $50,000 between now and mid-July in direct financial assistance. That then triggers the second round of support, which was part of the second funding announcement by the federal government. So, and what that does is essentially aggregate that $50,000 over the next 4 months for all businesses. So that business would then get paid a further $12,500 per month for the next 4 months, with the total assistance paid over the next 7 months of that $100,000. As I said, we've had a look at the profile of the majority of businesses that are part of the AAAA membership, and we think most of them will be eligible for the full $100,000. I'll add a couple of additional points here. So the amount, as I said, the maximum amount claimable under this is 100,000, regardless of the size of your business. So it really is targeted at small and medium-sized businesses. Those larger businesses can still claim it, but obviously 100,000. If you've got a much larger payroll and operating expenses, isn't as significant. But I think $100,000 in the next 7 months for all businesses is pretty good. The minimum amount is 20,000, but really our analysis shows if your monthly PAYG withholding tax is over about 8,500, you will receive the full $100,000 payment. And the only businesses that wouldn't be eligible for this are those at over 50 million in turnover, or the ones that are below the threshold where you have to lodge a BAS statement, or if you don't withhold any PAYG for your employees. Second point I'd make is that the cash payments will only be made by the ATO if you're in credit with them. So if you owe the tax office money, then the rebate will be credited against your outstanding debt. But if you're clear and you're in credit with them, they will rebate that directly back into your account. And finally, and this is a question that's been asked before, you won't have to pay this money back if your business circumstances change later in the year. This program has one aim, and that's to keep businesses trading and employing people over the next few months. So essentially, if you've got cash reserves to keep you going through to mid-May, then you're guaranteed of getting that initial $32,000 payment if you lodge your BAS statement online, and I'd certainly recommend that you do that. The other program that I'll talk about briefly tonight is a program to support apprentices. And to be eligible for this program, you have to be a company of less than 20 employees and be currently employing an apprentice. So it's important that you don't need to put a new apprentice on. This is for apprentices that are already part of your business. And you do have to actually apply for this program. It's not automatic. And this scheme provides a cash payment of up to $21,000 per employee over the next 12 months, and that's paid in quarterly instalments of $7,000. So essentially, a business that employs one apprentice and meets that minimum criteria is eligible for around $121,000 in direct financial assistance over the next 12 months. So certainly, and as I said, that apprentice program is the one that you have to apply for. The cash flow assistance program is automatic. There's a number of other government assistance programs. There's an accelerated depreciation program for asset write-off, and that's something that would be lodged as part of your annual return. There's also in recent days been a number of state government programs that have been announced, including payroll tax relief for larger businesses. So this afternoon we sent out a comprehensive overview of these programs and how to access them, and we'll put that. We also have put that information on our website under that news section at the AAA.com. I would recommend that you discuss government assistance with your accountants to make sure that you are maximising the significant amount of government financial support that is available to you out there. That's enough for me. I'll come back at the Q&A session at the end, and I'm happy to answer any more specific questions on any of the points that I've covered. But I'll now hand over to Emma Dalley from ILG, who will run you through the implications of COVID-19 on your workplace. So Emma, over to you.
Hello everyone, just checking everyone can hear me okay. Sorry, I just lost some of my functionality. I'm trying to get it back. Great, everyone can hear me. That's good. Thank you, Stuart. Hello everyone, and I hope you're all keeping well during this tough time. As Stuart mentioned, I'll be taking you through the next portion of the webinar regarding COVID-19 in the workplace. Can everyone see my slides at the moment? Excellent. Okay, so we'll have limited time available, so I'll try to move through each part relatively quickly so we can spend most of the time at the question and answer portion. Okay, so this is what we'll be covering. Firstly, we'll briefly run through some of the recommended health and safety practices. We'll also explain when employees will be required to self-isolate and possible alternate work arrangements. We'll then move on to leave entitlements. We will do a short refresher on the different types of leave and when they'll apply. And finally, we'll cover closures and stand downs, which I'm sure most of you are keen to hear about. I'll just preface this by saying that the slides are a bit wordy, but that's being done intentionally because I will make these available for members so that we can share this at the end. Sorry, I was just reading Joss's comment. Yes, we will share this at the end and it'll be an additional resource for you, hence why it's so wordy. So it's got some definitions in there and useful information just to supplement the guide that we've already sent out. Okay, so workplace health and safety. Obviously, COVID-19 poses a risk to people's health and safety. Employers have a duty of care to ensure that as far as they can, the health and safety of their workers is taken care of. So we've listed here some just recommendations. Department of Health are making recommendations around what you can do in your workplace to try to minimise the risk of exposure. So obviously encourage good hygiene in the workplace. This includes customers providing access to hand hygiene stations on entry and exits, encouraging them only to touch what they intend to purchase, possibly even limiting the amount of customers in the store at the one time, even though you may not be subject to certain restrictions. It's just a good practice. Provide access to facilities for good hygiene, such as adequate supply of soap, water, toilet paper, if you can get it. Ensure these are kept clean and stocked. Encourage workers to practice good hygiene, washing hands, sanitising if you can get a hold of any sanitisers, covering coughs and sneezes, limiting contact with others, social distancing. I know there's been a bit of conflicting information out there on social distancing and how this works in the workplace, but the general practice is to try to keep 1.5 metres distance, but there also is some commentary now around the 4 square metre in enclosed spaces gatherings, trying to accommodate that in the workplace as well. If you can, ensure regular and scheduled cleaning of the workplace, especially frequently touched areas. Try to disinfect areas as much as you can. Use PPE appropriately. This isn't necessarily going to prevent workers from contracting the virus, but it's still good practice. And just remember, everyone's stressed at the moment, including your workers. So do what you can to reduce those psychological risks. We have provided a document which lists out some providers, hotlines that can be called. It might be worth also providing this to your staff as well. Okay. Self-isolation, quarantine. Okay, so if an employee is a confirmed case or has been in close contact with a confirmed case, has travelled internationally or interstate since the border restrictions have been imposed, they'll need to self-isolate for 14 days. That's required. Just a note, and we'll delve into this a bit deeper down the track, an employer is not required to pay an employee who's subject to an enforceable government direction to self-isolate, which prevents them from working unless the employee uses their paid leave entitlements during that time or works from home. So just note that you're not expected to cover that period as a paid stand down. You would allow the employees to access their paid leave entitlements first, or if possible, if they can work from home, which I understand isn't really suitable for many people in this industry, then they'd be paid as usual. Okay. I note that some people are asking questions on the webinar chat. I probably won't have a chance to read those questions and answer them as I go, so maybe just try to save them for the question and answer portion if you can. Okay. So alternate work arrangements, as I said before, this may not be suitable for many of the businesses and employees in the industry, but it may be a suitable alternative for some office workers, admin, HR, sales. I've talked to a large range of members over the last few days, and some businesses can accommodate working from home arrangements. Some businesses it's just not feasible. But if you can, these arrangements can be entered into by mutual agreement. They're sometimes a good solution if the employee is a high risk, is susceptible, has a heart condition, for instance, wants to stay home as a preventative measure and is able to do their work from home, then that's a potential option for them. Or if they're already required to self-isolate but they're otherwise fit to work, then if they can, that might be a solution. But just be aware that you've still got to ensure safe systems. It's still a workplace, even though they're at home. So you're going to make sure they're set up and safe to be able to work from home. And as mentioned before, it would usually be paid as normal unless they're doing reduced hours or reduced workload. Okay. Just to be clear, not a requirement, but just a possible alternative. Okay, leave entitlements. So this is a bit of a refresher. In the guide, we've set out some scenarios that AAAA has up on its website, but I just want to touch base with new legislation just to confirm that during this period they're going to reduce those notice periods down, also allow employees to take their periods of long service leave in more bite-sized chunks. I think there used to be a larger time frame which they had to take it. Unpaid leave. So just confirming again, if employees have exhausted their paid leave entitlements, then the employer can authorise a period of unpaid leave. For example, if an employee requests to stay home as a precaution, is not sick or not required to self-isolate, but has no paid leave entitlements, the employer may take unpaid leave. Sorry, the employee may take unpaid leave by agreement with the employer. So this is here at temporary closures, so shutdowns with pay and without pay. So this one's been very controversial, understandably. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where under the Fair Work Act, the ability to be able to stand people down without pay is very limited, and we've never had to do it for a pandemic before. So there's not a whole lot of case law about what would be acceptable and what wouldn't be acceptable. It's usually used when there's a breakdown in machinery or a severe weather event, such as a flood or fire. And I know that a lot of employers out there are trying to, draw connections with, well, in floods, we're able to shut down without pay, so why can't we do it now? I understand all of those concerns, but there are just some things that you need to bear in mind and be very cautious about with standing staff down. And really, we don't recommend that you proceed to stand down until you've discussed the individual facts and circumstances with us, because we can guide you through whether or not that's going to be a risky move or whether or not you are able to stand down without pay. So most relevantly in those stand down provisions, the one that's going to apply to this COVID-19 situation is if there is a stoppage of work, the employees cannot be usefully employed. And this doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be usefully employed in their position. It means they can't be usefully employed by the employer in the business. That doesn't also mean that you're expected to sweep floors. It's useful employment. Okay, so, and also the third criteria is that the employer cannot reasonably be held responsible for it. So of course, employers can't reasonably be held responsible for a pandemic like this. And I understand that a lot of employees cannot be usefully employed at the moment because there's no work coming in. However, I think we it gets a little bit complex around the stoppage of work. So if an employers now stand down staff because of a downturn, chances are that they're not going to be able to stand them down without pay, that they're actually going to potentially put themselves at risk of having to pay back those wages. The reason for that is that we haven't received a direction from the government at the moment to shut down, and it's likely that you'll be an essential service anyway, so that direction may never come. That would be a clear example, which I'll go through later, of when you can stand someone down without pay. So it's about the stoppage of work. A stoppage of work is where, for instance, you have to shut your doors, you have no say in it. If you shut down now because of a downturn, you have the option of, instead of that, unfortunately, and bluntly, you have the option of entering into agreements with staff around them taking leave entitlements, taking unpaid leave, reducing their hours by mutual agreement as an alternative, and worst case, terminating staff, making them redundant. So look, I understand this has been one of the more upsetting pieces of advice out there at the moment, but this is all consistent with what the Fair Work Ombudsman is saying at the moment. It may change. I'm hoping that we get some more clarity around individual circumstances or a broader scope of when we'd be able to stand down without pay, but as it currently stands, there's only a few examples that are being given by Fair Work when it would be acceptable, and a lot of the time it won't apply just because of a downturn because of COVID-19. Also, just bear in mind to check any enterprise agreements. I know a lot of you may not be subject to enterprise agreements, but in case you are, check those, and employment contracts, because they may have additional stand down provisions. So if they do, then you're required to follow the process set out in the contracts and the enterprise agreements. Generally, it's along the same lines as the Fair Work Act anyway. Okay, stand down with pay, just to confirm that you generally can't stand down employees simply because there's a deterioration of business conditions or because an employee has COVID-19. If an employer unlawfully stands down an employee without pay, meaning if you don't stand them down in line with the provisions of the Fair Work Act, then the employees will likely be able to recover those unpaid wages. And I understand it's not sustainable for many businesses to stand people down with pay. So we're available to talk to members about their options and guide them through what steps they can take if they're in that situation. Okay, these are the examples that I mentioned before that Fair Work has provided around when employers may be able to stand down employees, so directed to shut down, so an enforceable government direction requiring the business to close, that's very clear cut. But again, if you're an essential service, then that may not happen. Workforce has had to self-isolate, so if a large portion of the workforce has had to self-isolate as a result of COVID-19, as a result of either being diagnosed or exposed to it, crossing borders, and your business can't operate without that workforce, then that may be grounds for you to stand down without pay. The other example is lack of supply. So a lack of supply for which the employer cannot be held responsible. So if you have a supplier, say in China, who's had to shut their doors and that's a necessary supply for you, you can't continue to trade without. And it has to be genuine. It can't just be, you know, you have a factory full of goods somewhere, but because the supplier in China shut down, you want to stand down staff without pay. It has to be genuine. You need that supply to continue your business. And if that's not there, then you may be able to stand down without pay. Again, it's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure we're going to see some other examples along these lines, but as you can see, they're on the more serious end of the spectrum. They don't really cover the issue where we don't have work coming in the doors or there's a downturn because of COVID-19. So we're going to have to manage that another way, unfortunately. And ultimately, this may be the other way, termination and redundancies. So some businesses are going to be in the position where they need to make roles redundant. Just before you do go ahead and start terminating people, a few things to consider. Are you a small business with less than 15 employees? If so, redundancy pay won't apply. You still will have obligations around notice periods and paying out leave entitlements, but at least you won't have the redundancy pay concern, which is quite significant. Is it possible to reduce hours of casuals as a first step before we have to terminate staff? Can we temporarily reduce permanent hours by mutual agreement? So talking to your staff about how can we come together, reach mutual agreements to avoid getting to a situation where we need to make redundancies. I've had a broad scope of inquiries around this. It's really nice to see that some employees are really on board with talking to their employers about this and empathetic and understand the situations and coming up with alternates and ideas themselves. So have those discussions. I understand that some employees are going to be scared or difficult and not want to agree, but it's still worth having those discussions to see if there can be any changes to the current rostering or overhead costs that may just delay, if possible, the need to terminate or make people redundant. Again, can you reach agreements with staff around taking periods of paid or unpaid leave? The reality is if staff are made redundant or terminated, then there's potentially going to be leave payouts rather than that being a lump sum. Can you come to an agreement with them about taking that leave now for the next few weeks, just to see if things can recover or that the circumstances have changed by then? There might be more avenues to usefully employ them. It's worth exploring that first. Unfortunately, though, if the decision is that you need to make those positions redundant, then the usual obligations will apply around consultation requirements. Any award covered employees need to be consulted with about potential redundancies and given the opportunity to discuss those, how it's going to impact them before the decision is made or before they're terminated. So try not to skip over the consultation requirement. I know I've heard of a lot of employers out there just starting to send out letters. I know it's a difficult time right now, but it doesn't necessarily exempt us from our obligations. So employees will still be able to lodge claims for breaches of the awards, unfair dismissals. So just bear all of that in mind too, because that's the last thing anyone needs right now. Okay, so that's just a quick run through. I know it was very high level, but what we'll do is run through some questions right now, try to give you some more detailed answers on all of that information. And as Stuart mentioned before, chances are we're not going to get to all of them if a lot come through. There's quite a lot of you here tonight, but we'll endeavour to take a copy of all of the questions, provide those answers in a fact sheet and make that available to you. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Emma. I'll jump back on there. So, as I said earlier, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So, if there's a question that you want to ask us that wasn't covered, if you could now put those questions in, and we'll start running through them. So, we might kick off with the first one. Can currently employed staff who take leave to care for kids access government benefits if they have no annual or sick leave? Emma, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I was quickly trying to find the answer to that one when I saw it come through. The honest answer is I'm not sure. That's changing by the minute. It's possible that they might broaden the scope and allow that, but I haven't had the time to look through what the most recent changes are in the eligibility criteria, but that's something I can get back to you on.
No problems. As Emma said, we will send out some information, Q&As and so on. So anything we can't answer on the fly, we'll also research and get back to you. Second one is if automotive parts supply and repair are deemed as essential, will this likely include retail? Look, the simple answer is that we don't know. It will be depending on how the government structure the wording and apply it. Look, I will say it'd be very unlikely that a pure retail store would be able to remain open, given retail. The rest of the retail industry would be shut down. So it would probably more be resellers that are supplying parts to repairers for the service and repair of vehicles. And there would need to be strict protocols put in place about non-contact from a delivery point of view. So I would think a shopfront retail would find it very difficult. This is really about providing essential services to people that are either working in emergency services or need to access their vehicles for essential services. What's the maximum term for unpaid leave? Emma,
Yep. So there's no real maximum term for unpaid leave. It's just what's authorised. But I guess to get to the heart of that inquiry, if it's going on for an extended period of time, there potentially needs to be a termination discussion there. If it is the case that there is no position for that employee to come back to, you would still have to consult with them as soon as you became aware of that situation. But yeah, no limit as such on that.
Next question, the apprentice scheme, the financial support's only valid if your apprentice commenced work prior to the 1st of March this year. That is correct. Sorry, I didn't put that in the criteria. So they can't have started in the last couple of weeks, but 1st of March is the deadline. Anyone that was on your staff prior to that is eligible, or you're eligible. Where can you apply for the apprentice rebate? Simple thing is there's an email, an EDM that went out this afternoon with details on all of these programs and how to apply for them. If you didn't get that, it's on the AAAA.com.au website under the news section. But we can, if you contact the office, we can also send you a copy of that out. Can you move a full-time employee to casual due to downturn?
Short answer is you can have that discussion and enter into a mutual agreement with them about it. That's a change to their employment conditions. So especially if they've got an employment contract in place, that variation to that contract needs to be by agreement. The other way of approaching that is through the redundancy consultation process. If you've identified that you can't sustain having full-time employees, that position's no longer available as it stands, so you'd be able to consult with them about that position potentially being redundant, and then as an alternative, it wouldn't be a suitable alternative, so there's a bit of information around that. It's not an equal position, but it's an alternative to being terminated. You would offer that, and if the employee agrees, then great. But you may be able to avoid that conversation by just simply sitting down with them and seeking mutual agreement. If they refuse and you're forced into a redundancy consultation conversation, then that's how you would do it. You would explain that position is no longer required due to the downturn, which is very straightforward. Everyone knows what's happening at the moment, but you may have a casual position available for that employee. And it's up to them to whether to accept or reject that offer. If they do reject that offer, then you may need to, depending on the size of your business, pay redundancy pay.
What's our ability to direct an employee to stay home if a household member has been diagnosed with COVID-19? Emma?
I think if they've a clear close contact case there, so the government's actually telling them to stay home, so you shouldn't have to direct them at all. They should be staying home, self-isolating as directed by the government, and I understand there's some serious penalties involved for not doing so.
Do we need mutual reduction in hours for permanent staff in writing?
Yes, preferably. Most awards require any variation to be in writing, and it's just a good contractual practice anyway. Even if it's not something sophisticated, something that's clear and concise that details what agreement has mutually been reached will suffice.
No problems. The next one is about the link to the apprentice information. I think we've covered that one earlier, so we'll move on. What are the laws around laws around having to pay rent for a building which can't be used for the business purpose on the lease?
Interesting one. Okay, so laws paying rent, building which can't be used for business purposes on the lease. Might need some further clarification on what exactly the issue is there, but
I think what they're saying is because you can't operate the business.
Because you can't operate your business. Look, I mean, sorry.
The federal government is working on measures to try and ameliorate the impact of rent on businesses and on households. I'm not sure, it's a difficult area. I'm not sure how they're going to manage that, but they are actively working on that, given the financial impact that this is having on businesses and on households. Sorry.
No, you're right. Jumped the gun. So are there any penalties for getting it wrong on standing people down other than paying back the wages? Yes. So there'll likely be a range of different breaches, one of which will be a breach of the award, breach of the Fair Work Act, all of which potentially will carry penalties. It'll be up to the courts as to whether or not they will enforce those penalties. So the short answer is yes, it'll be very risky to stand people down if you're not lawfully able to do so.
Unavailability of cleaning and sanitising supplies makes it difficult to supply a safe workplace. Can we shut down in this instance?
With the sanitising supplies and cleaning supplies, I think it's a matter of degree. Your duty as an employer is to provide a safe workplace as far as you can, within reason. You would take whatever measures you could to clean the workshop, sanitise it with what you do have available. If there was a serious risk to the health and safety of staff, maybe is the answer. I'd have to look into whether or not there's any support for that idea, I suppose. But yeah, I think it would be a tricky one to argue, to be honest. I think it comes down to whether or not there is actually a safety concern there, or whether it's a minor safety concern or a major safety concern.
I might just move through. Can we please have a list of the government assistance and form links resent? I think we can get email addresses for everyone that's been on this webinar, so we will make sure that you get links to that government assistance. We are also our intention is to record this, and hopefully the recording comes through, so we might be able to have that accessed to be downloaded. Jumping around a bit. Yes, we'll make the copies of the slides available as well. If an employee has booked annual leave in the coming weeks, can we force leave to be taken if they've changed their mind and they're asking for it to be cancelled?
This is a really good question. This is one that I had to do a deep dive on. It's been asked a few times. The answer that we've come to on that is that there's no there's nothing in the legislation which permits or prevents employers from cancelling, or from employees withdrawing their leave. And there's also nothing that says that employers have to allow the withdrawal of an approved annual leave. So the answer is, from what we can see based on the commentary, that yes, that the employee has to continue to take their annual leave. Obviously, you would try to be reasonable about it. If you could allow them to come back to work, if there was work to come back to, consider it. But certainly if they've applied for that leave, then they should take it. And in the circumstances, it's probably the best thing for them to do anyway.
Excellent. If there's a complete shutdown period, will admin staff still be able to visit the premises while the business is not actively trading to complete the usual admin tasks like payroll? I'd probably say no. A full lockdown will mean that, and I mean, we can only really go on the international experience, but depending on how strict and the lockdowns are, they will actually, if it gets to the point that the government will actually restrict movement to just getting bare essentials and medical supplies and pharmacy and so on, and even limit your ability to go to leave. You might be able to leave the house once a day to do exercise and so on. But no, I don't think with a full lockdown that you can just have one person working in the business. Is that your understanding, Em?
Yeah, to a degree, there's going to be an expectation that employers, I mean, a lot of them won't, but the expectation is that you have contingencies in place for this. So the recommendations have been start organising your alternatives to how you're going to handle tasks like payroll, so that staff aren't exposed to further risks by having to go into the business premises.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think anyone that hasn't thought about a business continuity plan, we are doing our best on this essential services thing, but I think every business needs to be prepared to work from home or have your team work from home if at all possible, because that's unfortunately a very real prospect that we're all facing over the coming weeks. I have a qualified mechanic who's doing an auto elect certificate, and it is also listed as a mature age apprentice. Can I apply for the apprentice subsidy? Look, we can't give specific advice. I would assume if they're listed as an apprentice, then you should be able to, but you'd have to get specific advice on that. There may be some information on the links that we send you. Otherwise, there'll be a number to call on that one. During a government ordered stand down, the business must close. Can we still employ staff if we have useful work for them to do? Our bookkeeper would still have work to do. Look, sorry,
Stuart. We knew this one would be tricky, us sharing the Q&A. So with that one, as far as the stand down provisions under the Fair Work Act are concerned, it's not a workplace-wide decision. So if some employees still can be usefully employed and it's still safe to do so, then the expectation is that, yes, they would continue to be employed. So they wouldn't be able to come into the workplace if the government has declared that business be shut down, but you would work out alternate working arrangements like working from home to do those tasks. And the expectation would be that they get paid as normal for doing so.
If someone's on pro-rata long service leave, or if someone has pro-rated long service leave of 8 years, can you get them to use that?
So it depends on the state you're talking about. Some states, yes, some states, no. And some states will require a termination. So Warren, it might be worthwhile you sending us an email through the AAAA at employerassist.com.au website and just letting us know where you're from.
Staff members choose not to attend work due to fear of catching COVID-19. We are very active in sanitising. I'm not sure. Is there a question there? Can you force them to come to work?
Yeah, I suppose that's the question. Reading between the lines. Yeah, look, I mean, again, be reasonable. It's a stressful time for the staff, but technically if there's work to do, it's a safe workplace, then yes, you can direct them to attend the workplace to perform their duties, but just be understanding of the situation. They might have reasons for not wanting to come in. For instance, they might be highly susceptible. They might live with family members who are highly susceptible. So just talk those concerns through with them, see if there's any way you can get them back to work safely.
No problems. If we're forced to shut down, do we still qualify for the cash flow assistance program? Well, the answer is yes. Even if you're forced to shut down, if you're still lodging a BAS statement, so your March BAS statement would have a PAYG withheld to date and so on. So that would trigger that first payment. If you stop trading and terminate all your staff, then at that point in time, if you're not lodging PAYG on behalf of them, then you wouldn't get any subsequent payments. But certainly the first trigger for for that that $32,000 in the first tranche is the lodgement of your BAS statement for March. Can we have some urgent lobbying to have the stand down provisions modified to allow short-term stand down without pay? Look, I mean, this is a lot bigger than just our industry. You can see the government, this is an unprecedented crisis, and the government is trying to do whatever they can to keep people employed and to see as many businesses as they can come through the other side. But I'm sure everything is on the table. It's not something that we could do as an association at the moment. There just isn't the time, and government's focused on a whole lot of other things. I'm sure that, the government is aware of the impact that this is having on businesses. Go on, Emma.
I think one of the responses would be is that as brutal as they are, businesses have other options around terminations, and I think they're more focused at the moment on making sure that they've got some benefits to survive if they are terminated. So look, I can't imagine that they would change those provisions at the moment. I think it's going to come down to more of an interpretation of when that clause or that section of the Act does and doesn't apply. And as far as, this crisis might change things, but I think they've set it relatively high, that threshold relatively high for a reason.
No problems, thank you. How do I compensate someone working from home and looking after children?
Just the issue that I'm identifying out of that question is if they're looking after children, I mean, yes, they can work from home, but you would ensure under that, safe work practices that they are set up to be able to work the hours that you've discussed, you've mutually agreed, and that they're able to perform those duties without the distraction of looking after the children necessarily, or that there's someone else to care for the children while that employee is performing their duties. And as for compensating them, then they should be compensated the same way that they're usually compensated. If they've gone to work from home on reduced hours by mutual agreement, then you would assume there's some pro rata pay for that. But as long as they're better off compared to the award, then it's, either as usual or paid in accordance with the award if that's what's mutually agreed.
We've only got a few more minutes. The next question wants to go into more detail on the consultation requirements for potential termination. I think probably best to contact Emma at ILG tomorrow directly on that one, and she can talk you through that. I think we might keep moving if that's all right, Emma.
Yeah, that's fine. We've got plenty of information for you on that. So if you reach out, we'll let you know.
We have an employee who's been with us for 3 weeks. Are we able to terminate their employment? We would have to give them a week's notice, and would any holiday pay be applicable?
So they will have accrued some holidays, even in that short period. It will be very minor, but yes, if there's no contract there which provides for a larger notice period, their statutory notice period will be 1 week, plus any annual leave and leave loading that's accrued during that 3-week period.
Problems. Employee that was nearing termination prior to this COVID issue had 2 written warnings. If required, is it better to terminate on the grounds of performance rather than shortage of work? Is there the likelihood of less problems later on?
Complex, maybe, but we'd have to talk through what's happened to date with you in more detail. So I recommend that you reach out to us tomorrow.
Can we allow staff to use any sick leave they have if we have to shut down, even if they are not sick, or is it only annual leave they can use?
It's at your discretion. They're not eligible for sick leave if they're not ill or injured or caring for an immediate family or household member. But some employers are allowing employees to access their sick leave entitlements. It's just at your discretion, and obviously mutual agreement. If the employee doesn't want to take their sick leave entitlements because they're not sick, then you wouldn't force them to do so, obviously. But if that's what they need to survive and the employer can accommodate it, then yeah, apply your discretion.
No problems. If you run both a showroom for sales and a separate workshop for fitting, could you potentially be able to remain open with just your workshop? Look, again, this is really going to depend, A, if this gets up, and then B, what the wording of it is. It certainly couldn't have your sales showroom open, but obviously the workshop would need to be open to be able to service cars. I will say too that, as I said earlier in the introductory comments, this won't be a silver bullet for repair businesses or parts supply businesses, because demand is going to drop significantly. You're not just going to have people going off servicing their cars like they do now. This is really about providing emergency repair and service for vehicles of people that need to be out and about. I just wanted to clarify that. As I said, we are trying our best to get this. It's not confirmed yet, but you are going to have to make individual decisions based on your business, because you are going to be operating with significantly lower demand than you would be right at the moment, just through the government controls that will be put in place on people movement. We might just take, I think we do need to finish this webinar in a couple of minutes. So we might just take a couple more questions. Was the apprentice subsidy 21,000 over the 12 months and per apprentice, or was it capped at 1? Look, my understanding is it's per apprentice, and yeah, it's paid in instalments of $7,000 or up to $7,000 per quarter. I think it's something like it's 50% of their 9-month salary over the course of the year. And my understanding it is if you've got multiple apprentices, then you can claim multiple rebates. But just be aware though that it's only applicable to companies with less than 20 full-time employees. The final question, it was discussed that business models with 15 employees or less. How about businesses with 50 employees in terms of suitable viable options on standing down employees or reducing their hours? So they're over the 15.
Yeah. So the same measures as small businesses. Is the only real difference is that small businesses just have a little bit more flexibility, I suppose, in that they're not going to have to worry as much about redundancy pay, and they've got larger minimum employment periods. So staff that have been with them for less than 12 months, they're not eligible for unfair dismissal. So they've just got a few more options around termination, or ease of termination, I should say. But for businesses with 50 employees, then you still have the ability to have those conversations with staff, reaching mutual agreements around reducing their hours, following consultation provisions in the award about consulting with them about changes to their roster. That's more of an obligation, not necessarily entitling you to make unilateral changes. So in the first instance, reach those mutual agreements. If that agreement can't be reached, then you might, from a larger business perspective, look at how your business needs to restructure its workforce and consult with them around redundancies. But unfortunately, being a larger business, you'll have to factor in redundancy pay as well if they don't agree to the alternative.
Thanks, Emma. Look, there is a lot of other questions. We're not going to get through them as expected, but as I said, we will make a commitment that we will endeavour to download those questions and circulate them via a Q&A tomorrow with the answers. Look, thank you all again for coming online and staying online. These are really difficult times, unprecedented times. They're difficult discussions. I mean, it's heartbreaking. Our industry is built on entrepreneurs going out and putting their house and their livelihood on the line to develop these wonderful businesses, and to have a wrecking ball come through our industry and the whole economy like this is just heartbreaking for everyone. And you know, we're all having to make difficult decisions in our businesses. We will, as I said at the outset, the AAAA is committed to providing what information and support we can, and doing everything we can to help you through these times. We'll be putting regular information out to the membership through EDMs and through our website and our magazine and other news sources. We will hold regular webinars as well like this. The technology looks like it worked, which is fantastic. So we'll utilise this as if and when situations change, and our commitment to you is that we'll keep you updated as things are changing, and give you that information to make decisions. We're also going to be doing videos, and we'll be doing a video in the next few days on the government assistance programs. We'll send those out. Emma and her team, I think Emma's an absolutely terrific operator, and her team at ILG are ready and waiting to assist you. That is a member service, so basic information and questions like these, there's no charge, and Emma and her team will do it. And as I said, continue to go to our website, the news section on our website for updates on this. Just in closing, I did want to say to everyone that you know, this is a terribly difficult time for everyone. You know, it's a stressful time, so I'd certainly encourage you to be in regular contact to support your work colleagues, your friends and family. We have put out some information around you know, maintaining your mental health in these times, and some of the support services that are out there. There are people that are going to do it really tough, and you know, we need to band together as Australians and as people in the automotive aftermarket industry to really help each other through this very difficult time. So the final thing that I'd say is if anyone has got any ideas or suggestions on what we can do, what more we can do as an industry association to support you, then let us know, and we'll do what we can to roll out other support services and so on. So in closing, thank you again tonight. Stay safe. I wish you and your families are safe, and really just stay safe during this time, and support each other. And thank you again for coming online tonight. It's an incredible time for everyone, and we're here for you, and we'll continue to support you. So thank you very much, and good night.